Up next, we are looking at the developments for VR platform. So we look at how I made some adjustments to the project, and get it to work on VR. Let's get started. So one of the first things I did was create a duplicate of the heads-up display and adjust it for VR. So let's head over to the heads-up display. So we'll go to log, UI, and I created a VR folder. Then you see the heads-up display for VR. Here we go. The interface is pretty much the same, other than the size, which is following another tutorial I saw online. I used 1200 by 600. So, and I ensured I anchored everything to the center. Yeah, so that it stretches like wherever the resolution of the VR set is, it's going to adjust, appropriately. And alright, so that's pretty much it. We'll come back to the bindings in a bit once we look at the other things that I set up. The next important thing to do is add the VR templates, the Unreal Engine VR templates to this project. This is because by default I use the first person template, so I didn't have the initial VR setup, which makes things a lot easier. So what I did was add the VR templates to the project. So I did that by going to add, then add feature or content pack. Then I chose virtual reality, then I added it to the project. So that was what I did. And one thing to note is the virtual reality is not available on the C++ templates. It's only available as blueprints. So I already added it to my projects and I moved it to my UE folder. So I have the VR templates now. So after that, I went to my project settings, edit, project settings, and I changed under maps and modes. I changed the game mode to the VR game mode so that everything works in VR now. So maps and modes, and I changed it to game mode. Before I was using the lock game mode, which I had created, previously. So, but now since I'm, adjusting it for VR, I decided to use the VR game mode. So the VR game mode uses the VR pawn as the default pawn class. All of that things, targeted for VR. The player controller is set up for VR so that the VR controllers can move the pawn appropriately. So those are the major things. On doing this, so I had to modify the VR pawn, since that's basically our character now, so that it includes all the various variables, the properties, and all of that settings that we already set up for the character in the first person format. So let's check out the VR pawn. So go here and click the browse to assets. So here is our VR pawn. I'm going to open that up. There we go. So you can see everything is set up, for VR already. what I did was add the UI, that's the widgets, blueprints HUD, to this, and added the VR version of the heads-up display. You know, um, so that I scroll down. Um, let's see. Okay, here we go. So under user interface, I set the widget class from odd to from the default to the one that I created, which is the WBP HUD VR master, and set the draw size to the size of the widget itself. Also, one other thing I did was set following the tutorial I checked online, was to set the geometry mode to interface. The reason why I do this is so that the UI is curved, along the perspective of the player, because I feel it looks more natural that way, instead of it being just a flat, like straight menu, sort of like the Iron Man, helmet, the way the menu displays, so things are curved a bit, just to give it that sense of immersion in VR, like the proper way it's supposed to be. So that's that, and I adjusted the angle to the desired angle. After that, then I began setting the variables. So let's look at the major variables. Just from our BP lock shooter character, I added the health, the can interact. Here I decided to adjust the variable name a bit. Can interact refill, which is for the ammo, and can interact heal, which is for the health. So, and then there's the max health variable as well. So I added those things, and another function that is needed is the take it. I added that as well. So I added, just set it up in Blueprint. Basically deducting, so I minus 10 from the player's health, and if the player's health is, let's see, okay. So if the player's health is less than or equal to 0, then it's going to open the level again. Just like the same setup as our BP lock shooter character, but it's just the Blueprint version. So those are the things I modified in the VR Pawn blueprints. The next thing is to set up the inputs actions for the various inputs that is popular to our game, which is the shoot, the reload, and the interact. Okay, so these are all the input actions that were already set up for us. The grabbing, basically all things peculiar to VR. Alright, so that's it for this. So let's check out the inputs. The input actions. I added the input action for interact left and right, so that it works on both the left and right hand controllers. The same thing for the shoot, left, right, and reload. There is reload. Yeah, that's it. Reload left. Is there no reload? Yeah, on reload right. And then added them to the appropriate um, the input mapping context. Let me check that. Uh, okay, so I added it to the weapon left mapping context, which is this, and the weapon right as appropriate. So the ones that belong to the left, and the one that belongs to the right, to the right. Yeah. So I also mapped the. Let's see. Let's open that up. So see. So I also mapped the interact to this weapon as well. So it's basically we can only shoot when the weapon is in our hands, or reload or interact. And this was already added. This was already set up on the player controller, so we didn't need to do any much adjustment there. The next thing is for the enemy attack to work, because the enemy at the moment is looking for the BP lock shooter character. That is what the configuration that we have in our projects. If we open it up, let's open up the C++ class for the enemy. Let's go to enemy. Let's check the header file. So the header file, we have the attack. So under attack, we have, let's look at the implementation. So currently, all we just do is we cast the player will get the reference to the lock shooter character. But since we are using VR, we are not going to find the lock shooter character since I switched the game mode and then I'm using the VR pawn. So what we are supposed to be looking for is the VR pawn. But since it's a blueprints class, we can't access it, at least based on my knowledge of Unreal Engine so far. So just like there's no way for me to access it. So I just figured that it would be appropriate for me to then implement this attack VR somehow in the blueprints instead. So what I did was create an attack method specifically for blueprints. So I made it a blueprints implementable event so that I can define it in blueprints. So you can see that I don't have any function definition for attack VR in C++. I only have for attack. So I set it up in the blueprints. Let's check out the enemy blueprints. So see how I set it up. It's essentially the same thing as this. I cast to the appropriate character, which is the VR pawn, and then call the VR pawn take hit, which I already showed you that I created. Then let's check it out. Let's check attack VR. So we need to check the enemy blueprints. So let's go to our contents log AI, then the BP underscore enemy. So we can see attack VR here, which I implemented. So it's a blueprints implementable event. So I added it and essentially cast to VR pawn, since we can only find it in blueprints, and then call the take it function. And let's look at the function I already showed you in the VR pawn. So take it does the same thing, deduct points, and if the player has finished, reopen the level. So let's go back to the C++ file. You see, so if the game is currently in the first person mode, this works. But if not, this cast is not going to um, succeed, it's going to fail, and then it's going to check for the it's going to call this attack VR. So that's how that works. The next thing is for us to actually attack the enemy, we need the weapon. So right now, remember from the tutorial, we are using the gun is already attached to the lock shooter character. So I thought, oh, maybe I should do the same thing to the VR point. So just have the gun always attached to the VR point, the player essentially. But that was taking me a while to figure out. So I just decided to leverage on what is already available, because I wanted to complete this project in any specific period of time. So I decided to make use of the weapons in the VR templates, because they have the weapons, the pistol, rifle as well. So I decided to just make use of that, and the player will have to grab the gun in the VR version of the game. So let's head over. Let's see. So this is the gun at the start of the game. So by the way, this redesigning of the level is from the VR templates, as you may have noticed. So I just made it more of a labyrinth, so more of a maze, added more partitions and nooks and crannies for the player and enemies to move about and have a fun game. So let's look at the Glock. Let's check it out. So the Glock is under the VR templates. I created it there. We check the VR templates under UE VR templates, my blueprints. So the pistol was already there. Was the pistol there already? I think so essentially I created, I think the pistol, was it a pistol actually? I think it's some kind of gun, but I decided to modify it for this, for the gun we're using in the game. So I tried to name it Glock. So let's open that up. So since it's a duplicate of the gun in the VR game, it's already set up for grabbing, for shooting, all the essential things. Let me actually open it up so you can see as well. So it's already set up for the grabbing, for dropping. You can drop it, you can shoot left, you can shoot right, depending on where the gun is. So it was very easy to set up. And the gun shoots projectiles. So that was like the peculiar thing, just like the gun in the original, the main tutorial by Mythical Game Dev. So I had to just adjust it. Also, it is in blueprints, so I just figured, I just work with it in blueprints. So in the Glock blueprints that I created based on the pistol from the VR project, based on the gun from the VR project, I made some tweaks, added the necessary variables, just like we have for the VR point. Added the current ammo, total ammo, max. I think it's supposed to be like clip size. If I decided to use ammo, just playing around. So then the max current ammo and the max um, total ammo, which is like the clip size and the max total ammo. So I added those variables, so don't be confused. So let's see. Then the changes to the blueprint itself were changing from the projectile to the line trace we have. So actually, let's call it shoot laser. I just adjusted the function to the similar flow we have. So I'm checking if if there is ammo, if the current ammo is greater than 0, then you can shoot. Essentially, just ensuring that the player can shoot if they don't have any gun in their clip, any ammo in their clip. So then you shoot using the line trace. And this time I set it to camera. Yeah, and then play haptic was already there, so I decided to leave it. Then once the player shoots, then the ammo, I remove one from the ammo, and then handle the hit. So if the player hits the enemy, then play sound at location, and also take it. So the enemy also has to take it, which I called here. So this is the enemy. Okay, let's see. Let's go back. Sorry. Okay, I made the take it in the enemy. I think I made it blueprint callable, so I could call it. So let's see. Let's check the enemy. The enemy take it. So the enemy take it is blueprints callable. So that's why I'm able to call it from blueprints. Yeah, so I called it, and then also add points to the global manager. Yeah, I also made it, this ensure these are exposed to the blueprints. So increase the points by 10. So that's it for the shoots. Then also added the blueprints code for reload, which follows the same logic as the C++ code. And then so check if gun needs ammo. So if the gun is already fully loaded, there is no need to reload, like it's not going to reload. Then check if there's ammo to reload with, then reload with the available ammo. So that's it. Also, then the interact event, that's for the ammo station and health station, also in my own case. So just leveraging on the existing snippet of code provided from the shoots. This basically checks if the gun is in the left or right hand. So you see that I'm using it when I'm reloading and when I'm shooting. So it was already in the templates for shooting projectiles. So I just decided to leverage on that. So I did for interacts if it's an ammo station or an health station, so the player can interact as appropriate. So checking. So I'll just quickly run through the code. Casting to VR point. Okay, before that, let's see. We're checking if the total ammo is less than the current ammo. That is if So if the player is trying to interact with the ammo station, that means we are first checking if they actually need. So this is when the player presses the interact button. So we are checking, oh, does the player actually need to, refill their ammo? So if the player is interacting the ammo station, do they need to refill their ammo? So if they need to, then we'll proceed to check the VR pawn. So then we'll cast the VR pawn and also get the interact refill. So we'll check if the player can actually interact here, and if the player can interact with you, then we'll continue. If not, we also check if the station is an health station instead, because if this is false, because remember I'm using the same sort of base logic for both the ammo station and health station, so I'm just checking, oh, is it am I checking for ammo, and if ammo is not needed, I can step and jump to health to see if the player needs is actually interacting with an health station. So the rest of the code follows the same as in the C++ code. Then we'll check the points that the player has, and then deduct as appropriate, and then give them the appropriate thing they need. If it's ammo, then give them ammo, and if it's health, then heal them. So that's it. I'm thinking, am I making a mistake here? I'm checking if it's ammo, but what if it's health that the player wants to? He's trying to reload. Maybe this should actually be in front here, in this location. This branch should be here. So anyway, let me just go over the remainder of the code. So okay, let me just make the adjustments here. So since we are trying to ascertain if it's an ammo or health station, so there's no need to check if the player has ammo, if the player has need to reload. So this check is to actually know, can the player interact with you, which is essentially saying, is this an ammo station? If it's an ammo station, then we can go ahead and check if the player needs ammo. If not, then we check, does the player need health instead? That's by checking if the current health is less than the maximum health, so then we proceed. So that was just a small bug. So just cut that and fix now. Alright, let's proceed to the rest of the breakdown. So this is essentially the implementation of the shoot, reload, and interact on the VR phone. So shoot, reload, interacts for ammo, and interacts for health station. So that is the major setup for the gun. So I have the gun here set to the appropriate mesh, the muzzle location as well, and the muzzle location and the grab components snap as well already set from the templates. Alright. The next thing, let's take a look at the ammo station and the health station. So let's check the blueprints in our log folder. Check ammo station. Close this up. So the ammo station also has to implement the on capsule begin overlap and on capsule end overlap in blueprints as well, because just like the attack VR, we can't make use of the one in the C++ classes. We are implementing, since the VR template is available only in blueprints, so we have to implement it in blueprints. So I follow the same process, created the on capsule begin overlap VR as a blueprint implementable event in the ammo station. Let's check it out. Check out ammo station. So the ammo station header, you can just scroll through and see these are the original. So these are the original methods that functions that created the on capsule begin overlap for the first person player and end overlap as well. Then I created the blueprints implementable ones so that the ammo station can detect appropriately if the player is the VR pawn and not the PP lock shooter character. So as you can see, let's check the C++ file. So we'll see that I did not implement them in C++ because they are blueprints and implementable, but I called them in C++. So once the normal on capsule begin overlap is called, like whenever an object overlaps, it checks, it runs the normal code for the lock shooter character. If the object that overlaps is the lock shooter character, it runs the code normally, which is to setting the can interact ill on the player to true, so that the player can actually interact with them. But if the object that is interacting, or the character that is interacting, is not the lock shooter character, is the VR pawn, then we need to be able to get the VR pawn and apply the same logic to it. So let's check out. The same thing goes for end overlap. So let's check out the blueprints. So we see now in my case, the way I implemented it, the player needs to the overlap, the on capsule begin overlap actually checks if it's the gun that is overlapping and not the VR pawn directly. This is because of there was a small challenge with the detecting collision on the VR pawn itself. That's why I use the clock to detect collision, since I remember also like all my input actions are linked to the weapon. So when the player is holding the weapon in their hands, so okay, maybe that's how it actually did not work. Yeah, okay, that's just making sense now. All right, so since my input actions are set on to the weapon mode, just like we checked earlier. So that means on the input mapping context weapon, that's where we set our shoot, interact, and reload. So the player needs to have the gun in their hands before they can, make any of those um, actions. So, and I also set the block as the objects that the ammo station or health station will need to detect. So if the player just move close to the ammo station and puts the gun, close, then the necessary code is going to run. So that's why we have this Glock here. So I cast the Glock first, and so if it's the Glock, then I now cast to the VR pawn, then I guess the VR pawn, and if it's um, an ammo station, like in this case, I set the can interact with field to true, and on the end overlap, I set it to false. For the health station, it is can interact heal that I set to true and false as appropriate. Let's quickly check that. So you can see can interact heal. I set it to true when the Glock overlaps, and when its ends overlap, set it to false. So that's the way that works. Now, so all the functions are working well at this stage on just the bindings to the UI that is left. So let's go back to the heads up display and check out the bindings. So let's go to the graph. So we can see the implementation is the same as in our first person mode. So I set the get health, this time casting to VR pawn and then updating as appropriate within the 0 to 100 range. Then the get wave as well. So I get actor of class, enemy manager, which is one that keeps track of the current wave and then update as appropriate. Then the clip, remember I'm using current ammo as clip, so it gets the Glock and gets the current ammo. So I'm saving this current ammo on the Glock, and I'm not on the VR pawn, not on the player directly. Then the total ammo, the same thing on the weapon, that's where I'm saving it. Then the kills from the enemy manager, that's why I was using to keep track of the kills. Then the points, that's the global manager, which is not a game instance, so setting it as appropriate. Then can interact text. So I added like two triggers for interact. Let's go back to the designer, so quickly cover them. This is because like the way we set up the one for the first person version of the game following the main tutorial, it works, but like in this VR version, like the contrast of the text was sort of messed up, so I decided to add a dark background to it to improve the contrast of the text of this text here. So that's why, so I had to like trigger for the text and the background. So that's why we have two triggers in our graph. So the text and the BG background. So for the text, we see casting to VR pawn. Then we are checking, can the player refill ammo or can the player heal? So either way, if either of the case is true, then we'll display that text. Since the text works for both, we are deducting 1000 points to refill health or ammo. So that works. When either of them is true, then the text displays. So the background also swaps as appropriate. So that's it, guys. So that's it for this breakdown. So we've had a look at the breakdown right from the beginning, from the initial project setup for the first person player up to this point, to the end, including my own peculiar tweaks to the tutorial, which includes the building for the Android mobile and the VR headset. So thank you very much, guys, for sticking with me till the very end of this. See you guys later. Bye bye.